Please help me welcome Loren Norris.
The person as an employee or a team member to go to the upper levels, go to the boss, to go to the boss's boss and say, hey, this is what I experienced and this is not good. You're going to want to hear this message today. Stay tuned.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.
I'm Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast. And you can imagine I've always been the one that's got a loud voice and a big opinion and a hard head. I've been the one on many occasions to walk into the boss's office and go, it ought not be like this, it ought to be like that. And that didn't always pan out well. In fact, there were many occasions where I walked out of the boss's office feeling like, yeah, I've made some progress. I got their attention. They're paying attention to me now. They will fix this problem. In fact, I know on many occasions I walked out thinking, whether it was a teacher, an instructor, in the military, in corporate America, in Fortune 50 companies, that as soon as we had that meeting, I walked out feeling like I had told the emperor he wasn't wearing any clothes. And the emperor appreciated it. I can also tell you that on many of those occasions, I walked out of that office, and before I got back to my desk, I had emails and text messages and phone calls and sticky notes. The boss or the boss's boss or the boss's boss's boss now wanted to see me in their office. They had an opinion about my opinion. They had something to say about what I said. They didn't like it. But I think the worst part is not when the boss necessarily comes back and says, you don't have the right to say that, or you don't get to have that opinion, just keep your nose down and do your job. I think the worst feeling is when you're treated like a pariah by the rest of your team. Especially when you were the only one brave enough to take advantage of that open door policy. You were the only one willing to step up and say, this isn't right. And yet, everybody else on the team felt the same way. They discussed it over the coffee shop. They would send secret emails or text messages about it. They'd leave sticky notes in other places and say, yeah, this has got to change. This has got to give. But I'm not putting my neck on the line for that. I'm not going to risk my job for that. I'm not going to take the chance of being cast aside for the next promotion over that issue. Oh, everybody understood it was an issue, and everybody wanted to see it changed. And everybody, it was a general consensus, complained about that thing, that issue, that person, that policy, that process, that procedure. And yet, nobody was brave enough, bold enough, or should I say foolish enough to bring it up. They complained about it, and then they swallowed their lumps of coal and went on about their day. And so the one who's willing to go, you know what, I agree with everybody else. This is a bad plan. It shouldn't be like this. We need to fix this. We need to change this. HR policies, systems, processes. I remember working in a group where we had started something in the company that had never been done in the company before. And the ability to do it required massive data tracking. And so there was a guy in-house who worked a little bit with some forms and templates, and he built our own database to track all this information. And the company had a system of its own that kind of worked in a dinosaur fashion. The system itself was built on a platform that was older than anybody that worked in the company. True story. And that system, it tracked everything that we negotiated. But we were negotiating it without actually getting paid for it. And so we still needed to know that it was negotiated because we had to track it for tax purposes, et cetera, but it didn't really have to go into the same system as everybody else because there was no instructions for them to follow if they saw it. They'd just be like, hey, how is that gone? I wanted to sell that item. Well, you can't sell that item. It's already gone. We've used it for something else. And so we had two totally different database systems tracking this information. And at one point I realized those two systems, not only are they separately tracking, they are in no means communicating with each other. So if inventory in system A was being tracked by the sales team, inventory in system B didn't let them know when that item was gone. If we sold it, if we traded it, if we negotiated it, if we gave it away, nobody knew. That led to a whole host of problems because there were those who would look at it as their own prerogative to say, well, I work in this territory, and if I see you using that inventory to get this, that, and the other, then why would I not use that same inventory to get things that I want? And so at one point, we found that some of the inventory tracked in System A showed that our team that was using it for something else had used it. We're like, no, we wouldn't do that. In fact, if you look at where the item was utilized, that's against policy. Not just our policy, but the generally accepted accounting principles. That's tax fraud. You can't do that. But there were so many people who were already using that system of negotiation, using this inventory that nobody's going to miss it. It's basically on paper anyway, so just do it. And they would put that little code in there that was our code of negotiation, and they would say, well, we did this. And our team was like, we didn't do that. We wouldn't have done that. That's bad. That's wrong. And so I had to run it up the flagpole. And I went to my boss, and they went, I don't even understand all the stuff that you do, so don't bother with me. And I went, oh, but it's a big deal. And they went, don't bother me with this. Okay, when your boss comes and jumps on your desk, it's going to be an issue. Well, somehow it got up to the boss, then the boss's boss, and the boss's boss's boss. And I was in hot water for a long time, as if I was the one negotiating the things. And I wasn't. I was in hot water for reporting it because all the people who were doing it could potentially lose their jobs. But what they were doing was illegal. But I got in trouble for reporting it. See where I'm going? See, this thing we call the open door policy, it implies to the person who takes the opportunity, has the chutzpah to walk into the boss's office and go, excuse me, we have a problem, Houston. The person who's bold enough, brave enough, conscientious enough to take that action, to walk into the boss's office and declare something that's hard to hear. That person has this internal hope that the minute I do this, victory. The minute I do this, resolution. I'm going to walk out the door feeling like I did when I made some of those pronouncements that, hey, this is going to get solved. Listen, team members, this problem is over. Oh, we are all going to be much better off this time next week. Right? This will lead to a happy solution. And the truth of the matter is, what it usually leads to is friction and pressure and challenge and burnt bridges and hard relationships and even harder conversations. And all of a sudden, in the coffee shop, it gets really quiet when you walk in. When there are other leaders or managers or bosses around, they don't talk to you at all because, well, frankly, they don't trust you. And so you took advantage of this system called the open door policy, the opportunity to express your grievances. In a lot of places, this is exactly why they have unions. The union rep will speak on your behalf. The union rep has no problem going all the way to the top, to the highest of high of tyranny, and speaking their mind, of negotiating that pay raise or that new policy or that extra time off or that new equipment. They have no problem with that. There's no recompense. There's no retribution for them. Now, I'm not a fan of unions personally. It's my own personal vibe, my own feeling, and my own observation and history and research and how they operate and what they do, and not a fan. But I am a fan of the idea that if you're in the trenches doing the work, every day you're walking through the process, dealing with the procedures, completing the paperwork, using the system the way that it's designed, you have a different look at it than the policymakers who often, they're nowhere near the system. They're nowhere near the daily process. They have no idea what's actually going on. And that becomes a challenge because they may look at policy from an external impact and go, I got to write this policy that looks like this, this, and this, because if I don't, and these three things happen, the whole company goes belly up. But the way in which that policy is implemented, the way it's handed down to the people who have to execute it, who have to daily deal with this new paperwork, this new system, this new way of doing things, there's usually a huge gap right there. Huge gap right there between the policymaker's intent and the daily implementation. And the gap gets broader and broader when the people in the implementation phase of that have to come back and go, the system is broken, or maybe it's working the way it's supposed to, but it shouldn't work like that. We shouldn't have to do this and then this and then this. If we just did these two things up front, it'd all be solved. But if you simply tell them that the policy they came down with was a bad idea, that this new way of doing things isn't going to be beneficial, it's going to actually take more time instead of less time, it's going to cost more overtime rather than save time, it's going to make people less efficient and more likely to bail out in the lazy way than it is to actually get more work done, which for most people, that's the objective. But speaking up about it doesn't just leave you with that sadness that you came with the hope that if I speak up about this, things will change. It will be all better. But instead it takes you down a different road where you not only didn't get the resolution you were hoping for, you didn't not only get the resolve, what you got instead was heartache, burned relationships and burned bridges, being the outcast, being ostracized, sometimes being ridiculed and mocked, finding weird things in your locker, on your desk, in your cubicle, on your car. Yeah, it all happens because people lose their minds when they feel like you've questioned their integrity. And now you have an even bigger problem than whatever problem you were trying to solve. And this is really where leadership comes in. And I don't just mean the manager who has to protect the company, protect the organization, look at your friction that you've created and say, hey, we've got to nip this in the bud. We've got to fix this problem. And that's not just what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is leadership has to come in at some point and look at this whole process and go, what could we have done differently? What could we fix in this? And that question begs of words. Yeah. Right? Something has to be said. Now, it's probably that something was already said that got you in the hot water in the first place, that created the friction, that caused things to go off the rails, that caused people to ostracize you and treat you like you had some kind of communicable disease. It was probably words that you said that did that. But the obligation of the leader is to undo that. I read a great book several years ago. In fact, while I worked in corporate America, I don't even remember who gave it to me. I don't remember if it was my wife or it was a fellow worker, but the book was called Daddy at Work. And in the book, they had this phenomenal leadership concept that up to that point, I'd never read it before. And since then, I've seen so very few people actually practice it with integrity that it's mind-boggling the way that some people operate. This concept is called protecting up and protecting down. And the Daddy at Work concept is that there's a process that we're familiar with at work that we should use at home. But what I realized was not a whole lot of people familiar with this concept at work. So here's how it works. And this is a management skill that many leaders have skipped over. Yes, I intentionally use those two things distinctly different from each other. Managers manage processes and systems and procedures. They control people through the management of these tools. Leaders, on the other hand, they lead, they influence, they manage people. one manages by policy and procedure. The other manages or leads by influence. Those are different. And so the idea of protecting up would look like I have an employee, a team member, someone who I'm responsible for. They report to me first, and then I have to roll up whatever they say, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And protecting up might mean that I know that XYZ salesperson is not going to meet their numbers for the month. This person has violated policy. This person is not going to be up to par for the next evaluation. And because I know that, what I don't necessarily need to do is roll that upstream so that the boss ends up with all the headache and the problem of trying to manage my people who are not up to par. I need to kind of stop that and just let them know we've got some tasks that we need to complete and we're working on it. And so I don't want to roll all of the drama and all of the problems and all of the troubles of my team up to the next level. They don't need that. I'm protecting up. I'm also protecting up when I realize that the boss, my boss, their boss, has asked something that our team is not going to like at all. And our team is, well, they could fall apart over this. It could be more drama than my team can handle. But it's, hey, you have to work late on Friday for the next 6 months. Hey, you gotta take a pay cut if you want to keep your job. I mean, you could have your pay where it's at right now, and in 3 months you'll be out of a job, or you can reduce your pay by 60% and you'll still have a job 6 months from now, and maybe we come out of this dark season and we all get back to 100% pay. Whatever kind of hard, bad news it is. Companies closing the doors, you'll be out of a job by Christmas. Yep, been there, been through that whole process, all of those different processes. But see, protecting up sometimes means there's a policy or a procedure that's going to impact people on my team, and they don't need to know that it came from the boss or the boss's boss or the boss's boss. And some of those they're company-wide, there's nothing you can do about it. Some of those are team level, and there's something you can do to manage or mitigate the problem. And some of those are one-to-one. The boss's boss recognized this individual had this problem. And rather than the boss's boss stepping around everybody in the chain of command and going to that individual's desk and go and fix this problem, they let it roll downhill. Now, at some point as a leader, you've got to take all that on you and go, this is my fault. I didn't train you properly. I didn't prepare you for this. I haven't walked you through this. I haven't corrected you when you did it wrong before. So together we're going to solve this problem. Well, who told you it needed to be changed? I'm aware that it needs to be changed. That's all you need to know. Why? Well, because I'm protecting up. I don't need you storming into the vice president's office and going, this is a problem and I've been doing it like this forever. And that's not what the open door policy is for. And that's not going to correct the problem. Oh, it might create a bunch of drama, and it might make you feel better if you've opened your attitude up for everybody to see. Oh, not a good idea for your career, but if that's what makes it. No, protecting up means when that bad news comes down from the top and it's got to go all the way to the employees, I'm gonna make sure that the employees don't go higher up to solve the problem than me. I'm going to step in. I'm going to tell them what we need to do. I'm going to help them execute that. I'm going to get it fixed. I'm going to fix what the boss wants to see fixed, and nobody else needs to know that it's the boss's problem, the boss's idea. Some of those are those policies, those procedures, those systems that nobody likes and everybody wants to complain about. But I protect up by saying, bring it to me, tell me what your problems are, we'll solve that. I don't need to tell them where it originated. That's leadership. That's not management, that's leadership. That's leading the people on your team and not managing them by policy and procedure. There's a correlation there, but they're not the same thing. Now, protecting down might mean I've got an employee who's doing a great job, but they do have an attitude, and from time to time they'll say things that get around in a buzz, and the boss is going to have their heads if they don't cut it out. Now, I've been on both sides of this. In good and bad. I've been the leader who's had to go to team members and go, I'm gonna tell you right now that if you don't change this behavior, if you don't get rid of this attitude, if you don't manage your day better, there's going to be a place where I can't protect your job anymore. I can't keep you employed anymore because what you're doing isn't just getting my attention, it's getting attention way up. And protecting down would also mean giving them that buffer, giving them that heads up, not waiting for the day that the VP of sales walks in and goes, "You haven't made numbers in 6 months, get out." Well, they're probably not going to do it that way, but I've seen them. I've seen that happen. My job as a leader is to know that that problem exists and address it on both sides. I protect up when I tell the employee, I noticed this problem, we need to solve it, even if it was brought to my attention by my boss. I protect down when I say to my boss, I'll handle this, you don't have to get involved. The open door policy is supposed to have that kind of near anonymity to actually do its work. The open door policy should be the idea that I can walk in and express what I think and it gets fixed. Unfortunately, when you jump 3 or 4 gaps, I used to work with a guy who was a VP in a Fortune 50 company. And the first encounter that we had, I had gone to my boss and they refused to do anything. And I went to the boss of that person and they refused to do anything. And so I went to this VP and I said, I just need 10 minutes to explain this process to you that I think is being completely overlooked. And after they looked at it, and their direct reports looked at it, they went, how did this get so out of control? How did this get to be such a big problem? And the next process step was that VP said, on this issue, from now until you don't work anymore, skip every level and come straight to my desk. When that document needs a signature, my signature is the only one that goes on it. It doesn't have to stop at anybody else. Don't send it through in our office. Don't wait for anybody to do it. You have carte blanche access to this hallway, which was the CEO C-level hallway. When you walk up with that document in your hand, they will let you in that glass door and you can walk right back to my desk and I will sign them. And if I'm in a meeting, the receptionist will bring them in, my executive assistant, have them signed and hand them right back to you. But I don't want anybody touching that paperwork except you and me. Wow. Okay. That was a brand new idea for me, the idea of taking it directly to the boss's 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 boss. And for a while, there was some friction between myself and my boss's boss and their boss. But after the process began to smooth out a little bit, they realized why it was such a big deal and why that signature had to be done and why the timeliness of that had to be done. And eventually, we were able to work it all out.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. I encourage you to go to storypoweracademy.com and check it out. Look at the different classes, the different levels, the different things that are available. You can take a lot of them a la carte. But spend some time there and see if that's the kind of thing that would change the way you communicate as a leader, as a pastor, as a counselor, as a political leader. And if that will help you, I'd love to have a conversation with you. Again, only 10 people in the elite speakers. You will have to apply for that. But if you're a candidate, I'd love to have that conversation with you. I'm Loren Norris with Storypower Academy. I look forward to seeing you inside.